everybody, to another episode of the Monitor Keeping Podcast. I'm Alan Stevens, and as we get started, just want to remind you that we are part of the Morelia Python Radio Network, and Eric's doing some hard work through the ups and downs of life and being sick, so we really just appreciate all that he does to help get this information out to people, behind the scenes work that he's doing, not just for this podcast, but several different podcasts. I mean, there's Morelia Python Radio, Herp History, Carpet Cliff Notes, Carpets and Coffee, the Field Herping Podcast, the Australian Herpetoculture Podcast, Reptile Fight Club, and the Colubrid and Colubroid Podcast. I actually had to go down the list and read them all, name them all there. But some great people, some great hosts, a lot of good information out there. I really suggest that you get on there, check them out. If you have other reptiles, you're interested in different things, or you just want to hear some great minds talking about stuff, some guys that have been around and new things they're trying, just check in, find a topic you like, read through the little headers, and if there's something you're interested in, give it a listen and kind of expand your horizon, so to speak. So you can also go onto the website, moreliapythonradio.net, and check out all that they have there, some cool pics. There's stores on there. They'll list the podcasts themselves and also their Patreon if you'd like to support them. So that being said, of course, I'm here with Kai. Kai, how are you?
Hey, man, not too bad. I'm kind of busy. I mean, I kind of say the same thing every time. And, yeah, I'm swamped up to my neck and stuff. So
that's good. That's good, right?
Yeah, it's good.
Now, you say that, Kai, but anybody that follows Kai online knows that you had some recent heartbreak due to some television show mishaps going on over there. So I know there is some downtime. I don't watch that show, but I felt your pain, man. If it was enough for you to post about it, I feel you.
Yeah, man. I watch like maybe a couple shows and I keep up with, like, they're just, I don't know why I follow them, but yeah, I like a lot of first responder shows for some reason, yeah, man. And one of my favorite characters is like dying or something. Yeah. I get attached to those characters,
There's a name for that, Kai. I'll share it with you.
It's called a badge bunny.
Yeah, you already know. At least you own up to it. At least you.
Hey, man. But yeah, getting back to the podcast a little bit. We have a really special guest today. This topic, or more so of variety of topics, isn't one that's always practiced a lot. Not everybody really goes to the vet. Some people go when they really have to. Some people, I don't know, maybe cut corners and get medicine through a secondhand deal. But when it all comes down to it, a lot of us need to go to the vet sometimes. It's an important thing where it's good to have as a backup. It's good to have a relationship with a vet. It's good to be able to, keep up with some of your animals on a more in tuned level rather than just going by the whim or guessing or more so of just letting things take its course. Sometimes we're actually able to intervene, or more so of just follow through with the process and get a better idea. That's my take on the vet, because before I used to be the keeper that was more hesitant to go to the vet, right? Or more so I couldn't afford it. Things were at a somewhat point where I didn't have to really go to the vet. I really just needed to see it through, but some things now that I deal with now, like wounds and infections, or gravid females, looking at x-rays, broken bones, all those are part of my breeding life now, regardless of whether or not I want it in my whole normal everyday. It's my animals fight, or they don't get along, or some things I possibly let slip through the cracks, and maybe an animal got sick or an infection festered or something like that, and I had to go to the vet. And those times have been really lifesavers for me and my animals, my whole collection, and just about how I go about things with them. I kind of never turn a blind eye at stuff anymore. I want to make sure that I'm paying attention to stuff. And a lot of you guys hopefully will be able to gather something from this podcast with our guest here today. First, I want to congratulate you, bro, for. Do you want to explain, Eric? We have Eric Kamp on today, and you want to explain just what you just graduated
Yeah,
to?
so I am a current fourth year at the University of Florida College of Veterinary Medicine. So in May, I will graduate with my DVM. And so yeah, thank you.
Nice.
And so my goals are to enter exotic animal medicine. So treating like rabbits, rodents, ferrets, birds. I especially want to focus on reptiles. They've been a big part of my life. And I actually want to specialize and become a board certified reptile amphibian vet. So help provide quality care to these animals. Thank you.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, we don't have too many of those, so they're very far and few in between.
100%. Yeah. And it's like the board certification process it's interesting. So the path that I want to go down is like, so if you ever go to like a veterinarian's website, you may see like the abbreviation like AVBP next to it. So that's the American Board of Veterinary Practitioners. And through this organization, there's actually is a specialty for reptile amphibian medicine. And it's actually relatively new. There's only 12 recognized people currently in the United States. And to do it, you can either do like a internship and like a residency. So that's like usually like a 3-4 year course, or you can practice in private practice, build up a caseload. And then through all of it, you're contributing to the literature. So you're publishing case reports, you're reading all of the journals, you're trying to just grab as much knowledge as you can. And it's on all different reptiles. So crocodilians, your lizards, snakes, chelonians, and then all the different types of amphibians. And then you sit down for like a 2-day board exam. So it's a very intense process. And for me, I want to go the private practice route. So it's going to be a process like 5-6 years in the making, but it's definitely something I want to do and I want to pursue. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck to you. And I hope you get there because selfishly, we need it. It would only do the hobby more good to have more people like yourself going in that direction. So, best of luck with all that. I'm happy to hear it.
And as like a keeper myself, like I definitely want to help bridge that gap, and I definitely want to help provide, not just from the veterinary side, but also from the keeper side to provide like a whole holistic type of care for these animals. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's good, man. Because that's kind of what we're always doing, right? We find like home remedies, you know what I mean, or stuff you can just do without the vet sometimes, But those are also you're taking a lot of risk because a lot of times you don't know what you're doing, and it's not always good practice to just bust out and the medicine without really knowing what you have to do, where to place it, measurements, things like that. Even myself, I find myself, because I'm not equipped with needles that well, right? My lady still does a lot of the injections for me because she's pretty well rehearsed because she goes to nursing school. So she's really, really well practiced and well rehearsed how to deal with medicines and measurements and all that stuff like that.
It's super important. Like especially like kind of like what you were touching on. So with the different conditions, like like you were saying, if you just kind of give medicines to the animal, you can almost like you can almost like make something worse. So common thing that reptiles have, especially wild caught ones, they have parasites, but and like I've actually really loved my parasitology courses throughout my vet school career, and there are a lot of different parasites. You have your nematodes, like which are like your roundworms or hookworms. You've got tapeworms. You've got your flukes. You got a lot of different parasites, and they all are, even though they're all worms, they all are phylogenetically very, very different. And so different drugs will target them. So like, for instance, like Panicure or like fenbendazole will target your nematodes really well. But if you have a tapeworm infection, it's not going to touch them. So it's really important. So like in fenbendazole, and even in like reptiles and in your mammal species, some of them, like it can cause some really bad toxicities if you don't have the dosage right, or if you give too much, or if you're giving too little, you can promote resistance. So kind of like how in human medicine there's like resistance to bacteria, and like we're kind of having that as a big problem. That's also something that can happen with your parasites. So it's really important just to be able to know what you're doing. And so like going to a vet who's had that training can help you kind of guide you through that process.
Yeah. I didn't really know what to do until Dr. Greek, who's a pretty well known vet here in Southern California. He After me going in so much, he's like, "You just want to take a bottle home?" And I was like, "All right, let me." No one, the vets never offered me that. And then he just had another tech kind of just come in and show me how to do it in the front arm muscle, and yeah, that was really it. But I would expect he just have me come in and come in and come in and come in, but it's a lot easier for me to just have it frozen in the freezer and
Mm-hmm.
let it warm up real quick and basically give the injections when I need to, by weight and measurement and stuff. But yeah, it's for me, I'd say it's been that that really clutch game where I can't thank it enough for having those antibiotics around me and everything like that. Um, the amount of time it takes once you've used it to heal speeds it up so
Yeah.
much, for the ones that are dealing with infection, or possibly a wound so big that it'll need antibiotics, because it'll probably easily get infected. The little, I would say the little superficial wounds, they kind of just heal pretty quickly, but the deep muscle wounds and everything like that, those ones take a little bit more time.
Yeah.
And I find that sometimes it may not have really been an infection, but a couple of days in, I'll see how it's healing. And then if the wound seems to be really, really pussy and not really responding well or mending well, then I'll essentially give it an injection. I kind of do give it a little bit of time on its own. If the seams heal really well, it's scabbed over, and it's not like pussing or oozing, or it's basically really puffy looking, then I'll kind of just leave it alone. But if I seem to notice that it's swelling up, if I do squeeze at it, a lot of pus and everything comes out of it too, I'll definitely know. But it definitely has saved a lot of my time, my animals' time, and the overall healing process for them. It's been sped up really well. Um, yeah, man, I deal with a lot of wetness in some of my enclosures where they coming out of the water dish, and the wounds on their toes, or they have wounds on their arms and toes, because that's where they bite each other sometimes the most, right? And you can rarely ever tell because they're covered in dirt and all
Yeah.
that. And so when it's dirt and wetness and poop, and they've jumped in and out of their fecal matter water, and that can basically harbor more bacteria than do any good. And so what I do is I remove the whole water dish. I give them just little cups, so they really hate it, but it's actually good.
Yeah.
They hate when I take out the water dish, but what I'm doing is eliminating their ability to get soggy and wet, or essentially what I'm trying to really do is keep the wound dry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Keep it from getting any type of major wetness. So that'll lessen the chance of bacteria harboring more and more and more. And then also the medicine is where what I'm using at home. Um, have you had to do anything like that with your guys yet, or any of the reptiles you have, or what are you practicing like when you are doing your normal stuff now?
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
for me, I have one. So I have my Aki monitor. He's a red Aki. His name's Charizard. So I just kind of, a lot of times I'm just monitoring him. So it's just kind of monitoring his activity, just monitoring, like, he's usually a very active lizard. So I usually am just looking at him. He usually crawls like right up my arm. So I'm just kind of just giving him like a cursory, like physical exam, essentially. I'm just like looking at his arms, looking at how he moves. I'm just like monitoring his behavior and his mentation. I've had a couple instances where he's kind of, where I've, either he's done it to himself or I've accidentally done it, just like kind of petting him, like looking at stuck shed. He's gotten some like very superficial wounds. I've done both options. One option I did bring him to the vet one time. I just wanted to make sure he didn't have any stuck shed and it wasn't like a necrotic type thing, and he was fine. And then another time I had a butterfly cage as I was getting him out some outdoor UVB access. I wanted to, he's, as you guys know, working with monitors, they will run whenever they get a chance. So I asked him to keep him
Oh yeah.
contained and just let him get some sun. And he kept on rubbing his nose, and I kept on monitoring it. And I tried to like put in a bunch of different hides and other things he could climb on and distract him. But eventually he just rubbed it to the point he rubbed it raw. And at that point, I just was like, you know what? Like I brought him into the vet already for a very superficial abrasion. So I'm like, I just talked to the vets. I'm like, hey, if I just monitor this at home since he was in so recently, like would that be okay? And then no, yeah. So then I just kind of monitored it. I was just looking at his snout just for any signs, like the same things you were saying, pus, if it wasn't healing properly. And so it really is just like a case by case basis. I think the most important thing is just to monitor your animal, like monitor its fecal and urate output, make sure it's eating, it's behaving normally, and just kind of keeping tabs on just getting a chance just to look at it, whether you're handling it or you're just seeing it as you're running around the cage. Like a lot of times I have a camera that's positioned at the cage. So when I'm out running around, it'll detect if he's running around and detect his motion. So I can say, okay, yeah, he's still doing Charizard things while I'm gone. So yeah, thank
Nice.
you.
Now, as far as your is that at school as well? Or are you able to talk about some of the stuff that you might have been studying and what you've been working on? If you've been, are you able to talk about are you technically in the clinic now or
yeah,
not yet?
so
Yeah.
with the way the UF curriculum's set up, so my first half of my third year, I was in the clinic, so I was rotating, and then in January 2022, I'll be re-entering the clinic. So UF splits up the clinic time, so we can have some breaks for our boards exam that's coming up, and so we have a little bit more time to focus on that. But we have our zoo med department there, so I was able to we work with wildlife, so birds of prey, tortoises. We get pet reptiles coming in. Like I got to work with a Galapagos tortoise that was in, several snakes.
Nice.
Thank you. And and then throughout my other years, my first and second year, which were primarily in the classroom, I would go into Zoo Med to help the department, to help volunteer and just to get some experience working with these animals. So it's not, the vet school curriculum is definitely much more focused on your domestic animals, so like your dogs and your cats and your horses, your cows. But for those that like exotics, there is the opportunity to work, and there's a bunch of other conferences as well that you can attend, and clubs and things like that. Thank you.
Very nice. Do you keep anything else besides
No,
Charizard?
I just have Redackies for the moment. Once I'm a little more settled, maybe like when I have a job and just a little bit more settled down, I definitely want to get him a girlfriend. So I have the monitor lizard blood, so I'm gonna I want to kind of just keep some Ackies still. Yeah.
I could imagine monitors in school sometimes don't exactly match up if you had a bunch. So probably keep you pretty busy.
I mean, just space. I mean, with him and then all of the insects I now have, he takes up like half of my living room. So it's definitely it's definitely a lot for me.
Yeah, man. One breeding pair would take up a whole wall if you let it.
Very true.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. If you were to basically do it, and it'd be a whole season, right? If you, let's say they were just to hook up, you got 30 days, or sometimes even 15 or 20 days in between 4 or 5 clutches. Where it's a clutch 20, 30 days, another clutch 20, 30 days, another clutch, and then when you're getting the eggs, it's one thing. You have to have the incubator space for that, which is a little refrigerator.
Right.
And then
babies.
Baby cages. Once the babies come out, you're going to have them. They're going to come out so fast that you probably won't even be able to sell the first ones.
Yeah.
And then you end up with 3 or 4 clutches that are all different ages, so they can't go together. And then they have to be all housed separately. So it may sound great. You just have to have an avenue and an outlet for it.
100%.
Yeah. Try not to hang on to all the babies.
Yeah, that's why
but yeah, man. As now, when you're working with you're just kind of doing the vet's grunt work, right? You're kind of just what are you doing? Like more specifically, what else are you doing?
As a vet student, like I'm collecting like the history from the owners, so I'm like talking to them, especially specifically with Zoo Med, like I'm talking about their husbandry, asking like the types of bulbs they use, size enclosure, types of substrate, feeding schedule, just getting them the overall problem, like why the animal is coming to the clinic today. I then get to help perform a physical examination, like just essentially just looking the animal over, listening for a heart rate, looking at the breathing, palpating the animal, like the belly, everything like that. And then
For just
yeah,
about
yeah,
everything,
and it's
right?
just like we kind of are
Yeah.
like it's like a doctor with baby like training wheels on it essentially. So like they like ask us like what
Yeah.
would your plan be? So then we get to like propose like diagnostics, like whether that be blood work or radiographs or a fecal exam. So we get to propose
Yeah.
that to the doctors and the residents, and then they'll either like say yeah, they'll green light it, and then they'll call the vet or they call the client, and then or they'll be like hey we should add this, and then they call the client. So at least in the clinic, it's very much like you're just kind of, it's like with training wheels on, essentially. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, for the listeners out there, and I think some of the if other vet students and stuff like that as well. For reptiles, it's not only just the internal problem, but it's the external. It's also the conditions and what's external that is probably also causing the
Yeah.
major problem. It's a lot of times major conditions that control just about everything. So let's say if you were to give them all the right medicine, if you were to just put them back in the same conditions that started all that, you're not helping anything. Um, so I'm obviously not a vet, but I've been able to help a lot of people over the years, hundreds and maybe even thousands of people now. But the one thing I've seen is I can help you change up everything, your entire enclosure, get it all, you know, done up well where the animal's going to respond well and essentially thrive, right? But let's say if their immune system was down, or they couldn't handle all that heat and everything like that, and they basically just perished. It is a little fine line between conditions and then putting animals that were in those conditions used to something and used to that into something totally different. Sometimes it can even kill them just because they're totally not used to it. Um, for me, it's been a little bit difficult to acclimate some animals for sure. A lot of people want to go to the vet right away when they get stuff. I don't recommend pumping your animal full of medicine right away, but you can go to the vet, maybe get some fluids in them, um, see how you can maybe get a liquid formula food that you can give slight injections to if the animal isn't eating. So you have to put on weight, right, for these
Mm-hmm.
animals to get um, healthy enough to handle the harsh medications that we'll be pumping
Yeah.
into them. That's just the only thing to do would be to try to get food into them, liquids in them, hydrate them, somewhat get their gut bacteria up a little bit, right? Because it's going to be pretty messed up when they're imported, so they're all really jacked up.
I,
This is
I actually have that going on right now. So I think Monday I'm going to the vet. And sorry to interrupt, Kai, but
no, it's
it's
cool.
just
It's good.
it was you brought that up, and that's actually the position I'm in. So I have some imports, and most of them are doing well. There's one who he will eat sparingly, but he's not getting the same kind of weight gain as the others. And he looks lethargic. You pick him up, there's tongue flicks and whatnot, but when he's just in the cage, he just looks lethargic overall. So I've done pan cure, which kind of just easy as far as the deworming process for basic stuff. But now I'm at that point where, okay, I'm not seeing what I want. He's not gaining weight either. So it's that time to make a choice for me where I'm like, okay, time to go to the vet because what I'm doing, he isn't improving. I don't have access to some of the stuff that a vet, of course, will have access to and can prescribe. So yeah, there's that balance. Ideally, I want to get new animals hydrated. I want to get some weight, hopefully, back on them, and then, like Kai said, to get that medication into them. But I think with this one, I'm at that point where he's not gaining weight the way I want him to. So go to the vet, work with the vet to tackle the problem, and with that understand. Now, this vet also has a lot of experience with reptiles, which is in my favor. And for the listeners out there, if you can find someone that does, highly recommend that you do that in advance before a problem, even if it's a little bit of a drive or whatnot. But also don't let problems go too long either. Well, I'm talking to the listeners. Don't wait until you need to get in. You're in that life or death situation. Sometimes, getting ahead of everything, it just means making that appointment, getting them in if you're not seeing what you think, or you're seeing maybe a problem coming up, so that you have more time to deal with that while the animal's still functional. You don't want its internals to start shutting down and you think it's still alive, but it's basically on its way out.
That's super important, especially with reptiles, because although monitor lizards are very much like they are mammalian in a lot of ways, they are still inherently reptiles. So their metabolism, the way they process things is a lot slower than the way a dog would. So the way pretty much they present disease very slowly, so they could be sick, but you would have no idea until they're on death's door. So that's, I 100% agree.
Right.
And to kind of touch on like some resources you can, for the listeners, like they try to find like a vet. So if you Google like the ARAV, or the Association of Reptile and Amphibian Vets, they actually have a find a reptile vet or find a vet function on their website. So you can plug in your address, you can plug in your zip code, you can plug in a certain mile radius. And so that could be like a 10, or it could be like a 50-mile radius even. And it will show you all the vets that are members of this group. So like the association itself, it's different. It's not like not all the vets are going to be specialists. Not saying that specialists are better. You can quality veterinary care from anyone who has sufficient experience with reptiles, but it shows vets that have an interest in them. And so then from there you can look at the website and really try to help understand that. And also just a simple Google search. Like if you type in all exotic animal hospitals in, insert city you are from, that can help you narrow that down as well. And then from there, it's really just looking at the website and then just seeing what types of services they have. And like, because then it's like, does it just have a thing like we see exotics, or do they actually go into like a lot of detail of like what they do for exotics and like what kinds of animals they see? And it's like, for, most exotic vets, when they're talking about reptiles, they're talking about like your bearded dragon, your leopard gecko, your ball python. So you can always call the clinic and be like, hey, I have like an Ackie monitor, I have an Argus monitor, I have a mangrove monitor. Can I bring this animal in? And then the vet will, they'll say, yes, we can see that animal. So, and like they're usually pretty clear of like what animals they will and will not see. So those are just ways you can find that. And like you said, it's important to have that beforehand, before something comes up, because like we were talking about, like when they do present with a lot of things, they're usually like, it's usually really critical. So,
yeah. I hate being in that. I've been in that situation where, unfortunately, I've had the animal on death's doorstep, and I didn't know what I was looking at. I didn't see the signs early on enough, and it's one of those things that it breaks your heart, because you're losing an animal, and you're at that point, and sometimes there's just nothing you can do at that point. So. It's for the listeners out there. Try to get ahead of that. Another thing, Eric, that I know, because I have in the past had to use other vets for things, is that vets also, in my experience, they do talk amongst them, like the group of vets, or they reach out to each other, or they have access to information, papers, whatnot, that you're not going to find necessarily online. Even they're usually behind some kind of paywall for us to get to, and I understand there's safety concerns. You don't want somebody just what would you, the equivalent of like what is that, WebMD for your reptile, and then go stick in your reptile full of all kinds of treatments that
like sometimes I think we'll have, the best is to go with somebody that's probably already had the experience that you're about to deal with. What we can do is ask the network of friends. That's going to be a starting point. Now, it's not going to probably give you all of everything, because the typical keeper is not an academic vet person, but they may have experienced it, and then can essentially be someone that you can relate your problem to, but you probably won't be able to figure it out 100% with them. So what I can recommend you do, let's say if you were in be some of the worst predicaments, which would be you live in the boonies and you can't get to a reptile vet, and there aren't any in your lonely state or something like that, right? Um, which many keepers fall under. Okay, that's because reptile vets are very far and few in between. And so, what you can do is start with your initial network of friends and experienced keepers that have gone through that,
Yeah.
right? Okay, and then you'll go to the vet, any vet. You can ask for X-rays still, and even just to get a little quick overview or measurements. All those things you can still have on hand, and you can still have a typical vet do that. You may have to help them restrain the animals if they're not up to par with holding certain reptiles, but you know, all those things are still within your capabilities, even if you don't have access to a full-time reptile vet. Many vets will still offer this. So I would still take that advantage if you can. Get those necessities as far as proof or actual definitive answers, and weights, and blood type work and all that stuff like that, fluids, and getting fluids if you need to, um, and then take it elsewhere, take it to another professional, or take it to someone that can possibly help you out with more answers. But try not to just sit there so hopelessly. you know
Mm-hmm.
there are quite a few things that you can possibly do. This is just what I've done in the last few years. Is even if somebody didn't have the answer, really, I put all the answers together myself by puzzling everything. And then I did find a good vet that will eventually help me out, and then all my answers were basically answered.
Yeah, and
All my
Now,
questions were answered.
Eric, what are some? I got a couple
yeah, go for
questions
it.
for you, basically, but what are some of the major, I guess, misconceptions that you've run into having, or being a reptile keeper yourself, and then maybe the hesitation or what's in? Because I know I'm guilty of this myself. I was very. What, it would take me a lot to get into a vet to fix anything.
Yeah, it's got
I
to be
just
almost
figured.
dead.
Right, right. So
Yeah.
what can you share with us that some of the things you run into, or some of the things you want people to know out there about what a vet is going to do for you and your
Yeah, so
animal?
I think I can kind of talk about like the misconception, and then just kind of talk about like what a first visit would be like. But I think a common misconception is that vets are gouging for money, and essentially, and like trying to upcharge a lot of things. And it's like, we vets, I think vets, they love all animals, and they're going into this profession not for the money, because compared to like medical doctors and pharmacists and other people, we are vets that are making much less money for the same level of schooling and everything. So they're also a business at the end of the day too. So they're just trying to make ends meet. And also, when we go to a human doctor, we have health insurance that's taking down a lot of the charges exponentially. So then when you go for an animal, you don't
Yeah.
have that insurance. It's like a kind of like a catch. It's like, oh my gosh, what is this? But I think it's just like the fact that we kind of almost take for granted, because for our medical care we have health insurance. So it's like when we are paying full price for these things, it's like, oh my goodness. But I think another thing too is that, ultimately as the client, you have the authorization to say what you want and what you don't want. So the vet will
Right.
work, the vet's going to offer everything that they think that is possible. So they're going to offer all the diagnostics that they can offer, to offer all the blood work, the fecal examinations, the radiographs. They'll offer everything that they will think is just, so then they can get to the problem and make a definitive diagnosis for you. However, like, a lot of people don't, for vets, a lot of us are like, we love animals. We don't want to deal with people, or not a lot of vets, I should rephrase. Some people are like that, but every animal comes attached to a human. So you have to have people skills and work with the person as well. And you can create a treatment plan that will work within the budget of the client, and also then help the animal. So you're
Mm-hmm.
helping both people. You have to help both the animal and the person. And so I think, and I did some externships over this summer at an all exotics animal practice. And so, and when we saw quite a few reptiles there, and what typically would happen is, like, you come in for the first time, and then the vet, we talk about husbandry. We just talk about the different conditions, and then, then talk about the husbandry of the client, and then, provide positive feedback, provide some critiques if there were any, and then just talk about like some of the stuff that's just required for like an annual, visit. So usually whenever the animal came in, we'd take a fecal examination of it if they brought a poop sample. So just to look for any parasites, look for anything, because even captive bred animals, a lot of parasites will use insects as like a compost. So even a captive bred animal can end up getting parasites from just insects. And so, they do that. They just perform blood work because like we were talking about, they have like disease processes take a long time to develop in reptiles. So if you have annual blood work from year to year, you can see like, hey, this blood value is going up a little bit. Let's investigate further. So I think it's just super important that the vet is on your side, and like a good vet will work with you and not feel like they're pushing you into a certain treatment plan, because they ultimately, you're the person that has the final say with the animal. The vet is just there to provide you their expertise, and they're going to recommend like we should do all these diagnostics, but they also have to take into account, we all have finances, we all have things that we can and can't afford. So to make the optimal treatment plan given the circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know one of the things that's also out there, maybe not so much in the monitor world because of the price jump per se, but possibly with something like a Savannah monitor or a Nile monitor. The unfortunate and ugly truth is sometimes it's easier for someone just to let that monitor die or expire and then go buy a new one, rather than go through the process of going to a vet, making those appointments, spending that money. It's one of those cringe things, but I mean, it happens year after year.
How much you love that animal,
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody honestly can afford it. It's just a medical expense. You got to count it as something possibly really high, Luckily with mine so far, it's been pretty inexpensive. All right. I've been able to walk in and out of Dr. Greek's office with x-ray, blood work, medicine, the sit-in, which is typically really expensive itself, right? And for like 150, 200 bucks.
Not bad.
I felt that was compassionate in price. But in an area where I used to live in before in San Jose, all of that, which would be the consultation alone, the medicine possibly, right? Not even an X-ray, and then just your typical run through of blood work and all that stuff like that would cost several $100.
Yeah,
easy, so it could be different everywhere. I think some people just charge a certain price of what they have to make to pay, keep the roof over themselves. But then there are prices that seem just really out of cost for what you can really afford. You may be worth it to go around a little bit. It is kind of exhausting, but go around and due diligence and find a vet with what you're getting is great service, and that should match the price, stuff like that, where stuff weighs out. You don't honestly want to be going in there and just expecting them to create miracles for $100. There's so much that happens, and that needs to flow for their business to run. So yeah,
right.
it has to make sense.
I think there's, Eric, you've probably been around it and you probably see more of it as you progress and into private practice and come up with your own decisions and things you have to do. Like you said, it is a business. But in my experience, a lot of I would say, exotic animal vets that I have been to, they are very willing to work with you, or they might say, yeah, we want you to get an x-ray, but it's pretty obvious that your animal needs this. So let's do this first. And then let's just make sure your animal pulls through, and then we can worry about an x-ray afterwards. Or they seem very compassionate. The ones that are good, they seem to also last for a while. I think sometimes where people, and this is an opinion, so take it for what it's worth. What I think a lot of people struggle with is that we're used to keeping cats and dogs. Our vet visits are usually based on that experience with a cat or dog. And I've been to those vets where, it's this guilt pressure oh, don't you love your animal? And it's like, you have to do the x-ray, the look at the poop, pull the blood, thyroid this, and you, like Kai said, it's $1,000, and you don't know what
Yeah,
what is iodine treatment for
it's
something.
it's tough, Um,
Yeah,
some of those things would definitely add up, especially if it's like several parts to it, right? They got to just go through and essentially eliminate what's what, what's
right.
not the problem, and then try to figure it out even more.
And
With
well,
mine,
what I guess where I'm going,
multiple visits.
where I was going with that to Eric mainly was like, do you think that someone that has experience with reptiles further on down the road is going to be able to look at a reptile and kind of say, okay, this is what your animal's going to need, and be able to tailor whatever treatment more to that animal, rather than maybe you do live somewhere where a vet doesn't exactly know what's going on with the animal. So they're asking for these tests because they want to find out for themselves.
I think it's like there's a yes and no to that. So like definitely as people as you gain experience, and definitely as I've gained experience, like I'll see reptiles, and I'll see some of them that come through. I'm like, okay, like I already am creating like a differential list of potential problems. So when you have like a pretty good idea of what's going on, you can have that little bit of you can say like have a short list of things that you need to do to then find that problem. However, if it's like an animal that's just like it's not doing right, it's just very lethargic, there's nothing really popping out at you externally, then it's like you kind of have to add a little bit more of those diagnoses to kind of get a better internal picture. So like the blood work typically, they're looking at, for signs of inflammation or infection. They're looking at organ function, like the liver and the kidneys. They're looking just for like if there's signs of muscle damage. For the radiographs, we're looking at the bone quality. We're looking to see if there's a potential like a mass that's inside. They're looking for eggs, things like that. And so it's like I think it just depends on the animal. So it's like you can have a very clear list, and then just some things are like they present one way, and you're like, okay, boom, do this test. All right, yep, it has this. Let's commence with the treatment. But for some animals, you need to like kind of have a little bit of a better picture, and from there, the vet should then talk to the client like, look, we can, we don't have a definitive answer based off the initial exam. However, we can do these diagnostics, or we can, they can prioritize it. So, they could do all the diagnostics at once. They could, start with like what is the most likely, and then if it doesn't improve, then come back and pursue further diagnostics. So it really just depends on that client vet relationship, and then finding out what's best for the client that will then ultimately help the animal. And I think too, I think there's definitely like, all vets are not created equal. So, for me, hand me a giant lizard, I am all, I'm happy as a camper, but, it's like if you give me a horse, I'm like a little bit more hesitant. I'm not going to be as accustomed to reading that animal's behavior compared to like a monitor lizard. But the classmates who like read horses like, like that. So I think, just knowing that, there's like some vets that will see exotics where it's like they'll see, the occasional very rare bearded dragon or leopard gecko. And so like they're very, they're not as well, not as well versed in reptile medicine or husbandry. So they're not going to be as knowledgeable, per se, for someone who's very passionate about it. And then, like someone that's really passionate that's not a specialist, or someone that is a specialist. So definitely, and even if you can't bring your animal to a specialist right away, if you find like a regular vet, like you were saying, Kai, but then like you say, hey, who do you refer exotics to? Like there's a big network of vets. They'll say, oh, we bring it to so-and-so. He has a good exotics department. So I think it's like a lot to answer your question, Alan. I think that was a long-winded way of saying it, but it's like, it really depends on the case. It depends on the experience level of the vet with that species and like that group. Because even though reptiles are very diverse, they have the same kind of physiology and the same kind of medicine principles to them. So it really just depends on the client, depends on the patient itself, and it depends just on the experience level of the vet.
Good stuff. Now, Kai, you got anything to say? I could go with another question here.
Go ahead.
Now, your experience, obviously, with keeping Ackies and being the Monitor Keeping podcast, specifically, is there a difference? Like you said, biology across the board is pretty similar in a lot of things, but is there a difference that you've noticed specifically maybe with monitor lizards because of their almost mammal-like capabilities as far as just their day-to-day, active, I guess what I'm trying to say is an Ackie will run around a cage, nonstop if it's set up right. It's constantly active. So is there a difference, I guess, with monitor lizards because they're kind of different in themselves? There's not too many other things out there that is just like a monitor. I'm a little biased, as you can tell.
No, we're definitely in the right spot talking about this. But, there are some differences. So I recently brought my lizard to the vet. We got radiographs, and they are very much different from a lot of other reptiles, like anatomically. So a lot of reptiles, their heart will sit more in their pectoral girdle, like right where their chest is. But for monitor lizards, their heart's more positioned like a mammal in their thorax. And they have the same similar intestines, like they're like the inside internally, they're positioned more like a mammal than they are like a reptile. And I mean, when you see monitor lizards running, they have that ability to like pump air through their lungs so they can breathe and run at the same time. So physiologically, they're designed to be these high efficient running, these very efficient predators. So it does play into their medicine a lot. And like some blood values are different different for monitor lizards than for other lizards. Like I think when I brought my reptile to the vet, they have like a little bit higher, calcium compared to other reptiles, but it's normal for them. So that's important too. Right. So yeah, there are definitely some like physiologic considerations when you're dealing with a monitor lizard versus a bearded dragon. So if someone takes a radiograph and they see like the mass, the heart of a monitor lizard, they compare a bearded dragon to a monitor lizard, like what the heck is that? And it's like, oh, it's just the heart. It's just a monitor lizard thing. Yeah.
Awesome. That's super interesting to me because obviously with the focus in my collection being on monitors, same with Kai, to know these type of things, but also to find a vet that understands these same type of things. And how it affects an animal different. You can't just maybe apply veterinary medicine across the board just because it's a lizard. Or I guess even with snakes, to veer off of monitors for a bit, you have some snakes that are highly active. You could say something like a Drymarchon, as opposed to like a rubber boa, and how medicine might work differently on those animals because of how they operate. The specific
there's like different, so like you were saying, different animals will require different doses for medications. Like they will have different blood value ranges. So like something that's abnormal in like one species will be the same in the other. So that's definitely true. I think overall though, they have the same basic physiology. And I mean, kind of talking about a difference again, it's like, they all have differences in husbandry. So understanding, it's like, that's the thing I love about exotic animal medicine. It's not only the medicine side of it, but it's like you have to kind of understand how this animal lives in the wild and how, the conditions it needs to thrive in captivity. So it's, it's also analyzing that and saying, a lot of times you can, like what Kai was saying earlier, it's like you have to correct the husbandry too, because if you don't correct the husbandry, you're not going to treat the underlying issue.
Yeah. Another, I guess one more thing I'll rattle off real quick is, I think sometimes people don't understand that different species of animals also have, I guess, a certain life expectancy too, or longevity, where, some of these, you might have some Australian dragons where they have a life expectancy of like 4 years. And then you might have something like somebody's iguana that's going on 15 years or something along those lines. How does that affect treatment? Maybe that's not the right question. Or, because things pop up just like in other species. I was going to say humans, but across the board in living things such as cancers, tumors, or other problems. How does that play into reptiles and the different species?
I think it's like kind of the same principle. So, all old animals are going to have a higher likelihood of developing neoplasia and like cancers, and like younger animals are going to have a lot more infections, things like that. And so I think it's like for a reptile vet, they need to understand, the husbandry for that animal. They need to understand the life expectancy, because like you were saying, like a 4-year-old iguana versus a 4-year-old water dragon, like it's different. So I think kind of like keeping that in mind, and then kind of creating that differential list from there, and then kind of going about it differently. So it's, for dogs and cats, it's easy. They're all one species. But for reptiles, it's like you have to know the life expectancy, the husbandry. You have to know how to care for them, so then you can tailor that medical care to that specific species.
Man, that's a big world, especially with us trying to get our hands on the next latest and greatest or new species. These poor vets. Here's this little micro gecko. Please treat it.
You can't. You just gotta let it take its course. So it's hard.
Another big thing for you go. Hi, sorry. Okay, so another big thing too that I love is like phylogeny is super important for exotic animal medicine. So, you may have never seen like that little tiny micro gecko, but let's say it's related to a crested gecko. You can apply a lot of the medical principles on a crested gecko to this, and then you can. So that's why it's like super important to understand how things are related. So, like a monitor, if there, let's say there's a new species of monitor lizard that enters the pet trade. If you find out what it's closely related to, you can then have a basic guide and scaffolding for how to treat it medically, and like how to deal with it then. So that's a super important thing. So even though, a reptile vet is not going to be an expert in every single species that is there, because there's thousands of species and no one brain can hold all that information, but they can have the general approach and principles, and then do the research and read, and then kind of fill in the gaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of times I forget, is that, cancer probably, or a tumor probably shows up looking like a tumor no matter what animal you're looking at, or similar things, the way different infections or worms present themselves, I'm sure is pretty similar across the board as well. So, just to encourage the listeners out there that, like you were exactly what you were saying, just because maybe your vet hasn't worked with your type of monitor lizard, doesn't mean that they don't know what they're looking at as far as in the blood or on an x-ray, something similar like that.
Because all that other stuff is pretty general. So, and even like to get to specifics, I think, let's say if a female's going through certain, reproductive time periods, her blood and everything like that will come back a whole lot different.
Yeah,
as well, right?
and that's like the thing with reptiles too, is like they're, the way that calcium and phosphorus and ionized calcium. So that's a lot of times like vets will look at the ionized calcium, because in the body that's the active form. So the way that changes in a female, like a female lizard, a female monitor lizard, just from when it's a baby versus when it's not reproductively active versus when it is, those changes are definitely very indicative of its overall status. And then like looking at radiographs and just all of that. So those diagnostics help paint a picture. So it's definitely all of it definitely changes as the animal grows and goes through those cycles.
Man, okay, Kai, you go, because I got more questions, but I'll take up the whole.
No, go ahead, man.
Well, okay, Eric, is the vet world as polarized sometimes as the social media world when it comes to reptiles? I guess maybe to break it down further, like whether it's food items, UV, tubs versus cages, what's it like on that side of things?
I think in terms of like the husbandry things, I feel that there's not as much controversy. I feel like vets, at least the vets that I had worked with, they usually take a stance, and then they try to keep up with the advancements. So like they'll push what's the most current and what's the most recent. So I joined recently like an advancing a herpetological husbandry page on Facebook. So I can, as I go off into practice, I can stay on top of, and I have resources to stay on top of, new changes and current things. So I feel like they, as a reptile vet, they will, we read research papers. We kind of are trying to stay current with what's the current husbandry standards, So I think there's really not like a big controversy. I think they're just trying to provide the highest, like, what's the most recent, what's the most, like, has evidence to support that this is what these species will need. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I think we would all do a lot better talking to vets sometimes before we get it, myself included, get out there and say too much about one thing or the other. But that usually doesn't stop me. I usually just run my mouth. And what I guess so far has been something that you've had to deal with that's just been, I guess, interesting or thrown you for a loop while you've been reptile related, as far as a case that's come in or something you've had hands on
I
with?
can think of two right now. So actually, they're actually both like my pets, but they were my pets. One of them, so he's not a monitor lizard, but he was a Eurymastix, and he was, I got him. I'm pretty sure he was a wild caught. He was an ocellated Eurymastix. I'm pretty sure wild caught, but he was doing fine for. I had him for 5 months. He was doing great. He was gaining weight, doing all these things, and then I just noticed he was sleeping in the cool side of the enclosure more. So I brought him to the vet. We did blood work, nothing alarming. And then I just kind of watched this animal just go from this very plump, happy Eurymastix to just kind of wasting away. And then I brought him back, and he had this big septic overall systemic infection. And I unfortunately had to euthanize him. But it's, it just kind of shows, these animals are very resilient. They don't show signs of infection until last minute. And you can do all the things. I got radiographs on him, I got blood work, we did antibiotics, we did pain medication, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. So like that's, like I think we mentioned it earlier, but we're not a miracle worker. We're just like a human doctor. We're going to try to do everything in our power, but sometimes there are things that are not, are out of our control. And I think the other story is actually just recently with my guy, my Aki Charizard. I just noticed he's just been acting like more lethargic lately, and he had just been putting on a lot of weight. So I'm like, okay, let's bring him to the vet. And so, we did radiographs. We did blood work. It was fine, and it just showed he had some extra fat pads inside, so he was just a little chunky. So he was a chunky boy. So I'm just adjusting my husbandry, cutting back, putting him on a little bit of a diet, and it's working. And I'm adding some other climbing branches, some more enrichment for him to run around on. So it's just kind of I think both of those stories are just monitor your animal, just have a good idea of what their normal behavior is like, and then kind of from there, if there's something that you try to change things up a little bit, try to rule out what things you can do on your end, and then when it's like out of your court, you have to go to seek professional advice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good stuff. Are you planning on doing any type of vermation, hibernation, cooling down through the winter here?
So I live in Florida, so I don't really know if I'm like trying to figure it out. Like I've been doing a lot of research on it.
So what you're gonna do is, I guess now, you can start cutting back your food, because you're gonna go into colder weather, and maybe go back, start by the days. Like let's say if you're feeding 3 to 5 days out of the week. Let's say if you what are you feeding now? 5 days out of the week?
Initially I was feeding every day, and now I transitioned him to an every other day, and then I'm giving him 2 weeks of that.
Okay, so 3 to 4,
and then
right?
I'm transitioning like every other day, and then I'm gonna try to keep him definitively at 3 days a week. So I'm just wanting to give him some time.
Okay, and then what you're gonna do is, let's say as you're now 5 days a week or every day, you were pretty warm, right? Or hot. We'll take it as hot. And then as you're gonna go lower as far as how much you're gonna be feeding. So now let's be strict, only 3 days out of the week, right? You're gonna do this for a few weeks. But your temperatures have gone down a little bit. Naturally, the temperature should have already been going down outside. So I'm not sure if you're not. It's a really difficult time right now because the weather is transitioning into cold. It's not exactly fully cold yet, right? So there are still hot parts of the day, and it's still can peak and get warm faster than would be in like January. So you're still slowly going down from here. He's going to be eating a little bit. You can do like 2 to 3 times a week, which is okay. But you'll be eventually getting to December, and into January, and that's basically a good time to call it quits on the heat. It's going to be consistently cold, typically, anyways. It's going to be consistently cold, and then you can get down to like once a week and just a fraction of food. Basically, make him also work for the food too, so he's burning energy for just enough to keep him going. Um, and then once you're into January, like let's say end of December and January, you've cut down your temperatures a lot. Now, not only are you using a bulb that's a lot less than what you're currently using, right? But you're going to make the distance in between the bulb and the basking spot also a lot further away. So it's basically less hot overall, and they just can't be basking full blown anymore. It's more like 100, 110 ish, 115. And if it is back to 120, something like that, where they can get up to a good metabolism rate, it's just for a few hours of the day. So your timing, like let's say if in full blown season it's 12, 14, 16 hours a day, which is very typical for a lot of keepers. I myself use good 12 to 14-hour days, sometimes even longer. But when you're at that point, you're running so much. But when you get to the slower end of the year and you're basically going to be putting them through a sort of a winter, you're only going to have your bulbs on for like 8 hours, maybe 10 hours, just several hours of the day, maybe the warmer part of the day. Utilize the cold at nighttime as your advantage to cool them down and keep them constantly cold, right? Because you may be using your heater. If you be using your heater, you may want to turn or open the window that's right near him or something like that and have that draft hit the cage, keeping the cage cooler. Now, what are some cold points? And I don't want people to just go from 70s and 80 degrees on the cold side to 50 and 40s, but some of the cold points here are 50 degrees as far as how cold they can go. But they still get to bask during the daytime. They're going to wake up. It's a little slower, but they still do everything. And this is basically their time of famine, and they're eating less, basking less, doing everything less, and it's all gone down, tapered slowly. Again, I don't recommend anybody shooting your animal from a perfect whatever it's been to all of a sudden it's cold. Just don't flick off your lamps. Do it slowly, like you would do a tortoise going into hibernation, how you would do snakes before you would breed them, like holubrids and some boas and pythons, things like that. These animals are basically going to be tapered down the same way. But in a difference, they still will bask, still need to drink, and you can feed them a little bit just to maintain some good muscle tone and weight, but not enough to get fat on. And that's how I'd recommend you do it in Florida where you're at. Your days would probably still be kind of warm, but your lamp won't be. All right? You're going to be controlling.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think it was just off that comment where you said there were some fat pads. It's just something I don't have of course, the educational background that you have at all. So that'll lead into another question here in a second. But what some of the things I've experimented with, talked to other people about, and with Kai about is, reducing that fat. We both have had fat animals at certain times, and it's like you just can't get them to really shed that weight the way you want to. You can put them on a diet, but it was keeping the temps the same as just feeding less, and it wasn't really taking that weight off. But then went into like some type of cooling or reducing it, and it's like that weight gets burned off. And then when you bring them back up, all of a sudden there's your good looking animal ready to go. And so through the cycle of doing that now, you can kind of attack that issue a little better. So, but that's just what we're seeing in that experience. But now, with that being said, how does I guess the veterinary side of that for reptiles, does it take those things into account as far as the seasonal changes in those? I guess it's kind of specific to the animal. So I don't know how you'd apply that to everything that comes in that you'd be seeing.
I haven't really had much experience with seasonality and changing of the seasons with it, so I can't really speak much on that at all by any means.
I think it's interesting. I think I look forward to, as I guess medicine for reptiles progresses, and overall, like you mentioned, a holistic attack, also or care for these things to treat the animal. Not only you mentioned the lights and enrichment and everything, but as things progress, to treat that animal. Well, I guess almost not even treating that animal, but basic husbandry mixed with, what am I trying to say here? It's like the preventative,
like taking not just treating the enclosure as its own separate little world, independent of what's happening outside. It's like taking what's happening outside, like the seasonal changes, and applying that to your enclosure. So it's like you're changing it like that. Is that like what you're trying to say?
Kind of, because I've had the conversation with some keepers who are keeping a lot longer than me. There was a common thread in a lot of animals, especially dwarf monitors, such as the Kimberleys, Polarized, and such, that you would hit like this 2-year window. You'd get your animal up to breeding size in 6 to 8 months, even, keeping temperatures hot, feeding a lot. You're starting to see eggs. And then at 2 years, it's like you got a burnout female, for the most part, the females, maybe the males too, because I guess semen production could be affected by that type of thing also. But talking with keepers that have been doing it for quite a few years now, not only the males' semen production, the viability of the clutches that they were getting, but also the weight on animals, and we're seeing this trend basically where yes, you can run an animal, you can get maybe 6 clutches a year from the same animal, but then a lot of keepers were hitting this 2-year mark where it's like their animals just dropped off. Now they have babies that they're raising up and they can kind of replace, and that's where you see all of a sudden Morph Market or one of these classified things, somebody's selling a proven pair of adults, and you're like, why would you sell a proven pair of adults? Well, maybe there's this history that popped up where they're not doing things the same way. They're burnt out. I'm wondering if veterinary medicine for reptiles is going to take some of these things into account, and how it would, or maybe your thoughts on all that.
I think definitely that will come into the husbandry, and I think that ultimately depends. I think that is a case-by-case basis. I think for someone that, is a breeder or looking to breed. So I think that just depends on the client, and I think that depends on the species itself too. So not every animal, I think it just depends on the life history. So some animals may need this seasonal changes, some may not. It depends on if you're trying to breed, but I think that applying kind of that type of changing in the temperatures and the seasons will help kind of overall just improve the husbandry. And so that's then in turn going to help with the veterinary care, because then veterinarians then can recommend I can help be a guide in this process as well, in addition to other keepers.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I see it pop up. I have my own thoughts, of course, opinions. I don't share all of them, but things like maybe I shouldn't. Go ahead, Kai. Save me from this before I say something.
No, man, it's this topic is a tough one, because there's so many ways that people do things, indoors and outdoors, and
yeah.
Look at how much we have to go through to set up one enclosure, right? With the advances of how things are, by the time a vet had to learn it and how to learn it, process it, reteach it in a way for the vets to all comprehend, and then have them transfer that information to the people that are needing it in situations, right? We'd have already discovered something else, and then they'd be a timeline behind us until of a person like you, Eric, where you're a keeper and you want to do that. It has to be I think Dr. Greek is also a keeper over the years, and I think he's just seen so many things over the years that there's almost nothing that he hasn't seen yet somewhere, and being able to have a vet go through every single little detail that we have gone through with our setup just to set it up for the animal. I don't think most are in tune to that just yet, and that's where things can go a little bit wrong, where how you would normally do things and how the vet would recommend it, basically just doesn't match up really, that's for me, it's been a tough one as far as vets of being on your level with how you are with husbandry or things like that. I think some people just see the stuff at shows or stuff in pet stores and think that's all that there is to it, when that's the baseline. That's where we're starting at. But how we are now, it's just totally different. It's like being a zoo, right? Having a whole I have the back end, the medicine, the proper lighting, the caging, understanding humidity, my automated system, things like that, right? My incubator. I'm doing things here, not that says the zoos aren't, but it's basically a small facility, right? And everything here is somewhat promoting wildlife, right? And so, yeah, it's a tough one, man. Where it's hard to find a vet for most people that's going to be able to have that click for you within your own setup and being like, all right, this is what you're going to have to change. Some things might be really simple, but some aren't. Like having adequate nesting for females. You can do everything else. You can have everything all tuned in, but if the female doesn't have adequate nesting and all of a sudden holds the eggs and retains them longer, then that's a crazy vet visit for you. That's going to be a pretty expensive one too, especially if you go through and get the shots. And so, you know, it's a tough one, because what we're talking about monitor husbandry wise, this is why we have the podcast, is because there's just new information out there. No one really knows this.
And
it's a
no, go ahead. Yeah, keeping and husbandry, like veterinary medicine and husbandry, are both related because it's constantly, learning new things. Because veterinary medicine, like from, when I started vet school, even is different from when it is now, and from vets who graduated like maybe 10 years ago, like the medicine they learned initially in school is different now. So continued education, like going to conferences, like I know for exotic vets at least, there's like things like exotics con. So like a bunch of different exotics vets will get together, they present topics and current new changes and things, and they have like wet labs where you can practice new skills, and like there's other things that like practices will help you learn, like they call them continued education, so they'll send you off to learn new things. So just like husbandry, where it's like we're learning new things and have to see how this works for different species and apply it when we can, it's the same with veterinary medicine. So for exotic vets, it's twofold, because you're not only trying to stay up to date with all the new veterinary advancements that are being made with the diets, but you're also trying to keep up with the husbandry, so then promote the best life for these animals.
I like it. I think there's so much out there that can it just takes time. It takes we have now in today's world, we can talk, we can interact. Basically, you can interact with anybody across the world in real time to talk about things and to share experience. I look forward to, especially I would think the next 10 years and beyond, as far as where technology and medicine are kind of meeting up, being able to pick things apart with DNA. We talked about some of the other podcasters, of course, some other veterinarians that are hosts of some of the other podcasts and have been sharing some information. I just find these things, are you a fan of Zach Loftman?
I don't know if I'm familiar with the name. No.
Okay. So he's, there's the Colibrids and Colibroid podcast, and he's one of the hosts on there. And there's a bunch of just information that he starts going in, like these rabbit holes, right? And I just find myself like all of a sudden I'm listening to salamander stuff. I'm never going to keep salamanders, but I'm glued to the podcast, listening to like where his mind goes, how he's thinking about things or approaching things and what he has set up around it. And it's exciting to me because I like where someone like you in your position, with a monitor focus, and now the veterinarian background can take your own thoughts, almost influenced by monitors, but like specifically, and pave the way in a new direction that maybe somebody hasn't really done before. I find exciting. And that's where the technology also, where you're able to pull things apart, look at DNA, look at, of course, the blood, different things, maybe even whatever samples from wild animals can tell us, from preserved animals. It's like, okay, pull the DNA, look at an Aki that was collected, somewhere in the 1980s, pull some DNA from that, and then pull DNA from a current captive animal and see what's the same, what's different, what that can actually tell us. Even if there is a difference, can we even understand what that means right now? I don't know. I'm going on a rant now. But I'm glad.
That would be amazing.
What's that?
That would be cool.
I'm very happy that you're a monitor keeper and doing this. I hope I will stay in touch with you. I think I've been following you anyway on we'll get to that at the end where people can find you. But outside of that, what are your, now that you've achieved what you've achieved education wise, what are your next steps as far as monitor keeping? Are there things coming up that you want to do?
I think definitely get a female for my guy. I definitely want to breed Ackies. I've had dabblings of whether I want to go into something a little bit larger, like a black throat, something like that. It's all just kind of up in the air. Like, I haven't really decided anything, but I definitely know in my future I want to have more Ackies. And I love the Reds. I mean, I love all Ackies, but like, I don't know, the Reds just have my heart. But definitely just kind of keeping up with those. Definitely.
Yeah.
Nice, man. Yeah, so whenever you're ready, man, just let us know. We'll help you get set up with that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I actually, the listeners can't see it, but we can behind you. You have your setup. Looks like if I'm not mistaken, one of the Zen habitat
4x2x2. I can just move my computer up to show you guys. So yeah, it's a 4x2x2. I got my hydrometer and thermostat for the cool end there, just monitoring ambient heat. I got a dig box, got some artificial vines, some cork rounds. I got a artificial rock ledge that he usually likes to climb up on. Like, these wood pieces here, I just recently got. He has a little hide, got his water bowl. I made a reach stack out of some slate rock that really helps keep the heat in, and he usually likes to hide in the rock stack. He's just hiding right now. And then I got some bulbs on the top up here. Got a spray bottle. I'll spray it, my temp guns. And then got my roach bin there and got some grasshoppers in there. So got a whole little setup up here.
Nice, man.
Go ahead, Kai.
No, go ahead.
Just gonna, looking at it from here, I see a series. It looks like a scene from Close Encounters. You got all those bulbs up there. What are you running? This, if I'm not mistaken, it's a 4x2 setup. What are you running up there as far as bulbs?
I got 2 UVA UVB mercury vapors right above the rock stack, so that's providing the main basking spot. I got an LED bulb and then some other lower wattage bulbs, and then one kind of like higher wattage bulb just to provide some other, like not as hot as the reach stack, but some other like basking spots that he can go to, so he has choice. I have a lot of different, he can climb up and down the reach stack, he can climb up onto the rock ledge, he can climb up and sit up on top of the cork rounds. I kind of wanted to provide him a lot of different basking opportunities and different temperature gradients, and then he has the dirt and the dig box that he can get down to get cooler. So I just wanted to provide a lot of different options for him, just so he can choose where he wants to be. Like thermodynamically.
Yeah, I like it. I bring it up because there's so many up there, and a lot of times you'll see somebody running like one bulb, and you have I think 5 or 6 up there. So
yeah, I'm currently running 1 or 2 bulbs in most of my setups. maybe 4 at the max for like the 8-foot enclosures. Yeah, that's the way but where I live is hot and dry. It's still hot today. It's what is it, mid November, and we're at 90 degrees today. So yeah, it's not really a scorcher, but it's November.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I also bring it up because obviously you got a healthy animal. Kai, you got healthy animals. I got healthy animals. I run one bulb in some 4-footers. I run like 3 bulbs on some 2 or 3 footers, depending on how they're set up, depending on whether they have full ventilation, open screen top,
What's
or
your activity level within that enclosure? Does that enclosure have a
It
screen top?
does. I did cover all of it, so let me see if I can show you guys. So I have duct tape and I have aluminum foils. So I've cut holes where the lights sit, and I've kind of put some cardboard down.
It's
So I've
just
kind of
cardboard.
helped close a lot of that down, and it really does help. Like the enclosure stays at least like 10 to 12% more humid than my apartment does. And,
So that's probably why you have to use so
yeah.
much, just because your roof isn't a solid, right? But picture if you were to use cages like mine and Allen, they're buttoned up so well, and even if yours is cranking a lot of heat downward, right, you're still losing radiating heat that would normally transfer back into the enclosure if you had a completely solid top. But you obviously have your lamps exterior to the enclosure, so obviously it's not being able to be trapped in there. If you were to kind of let's say change up your whole enclosure later on, you'll notice that all those bulbs currently would be
Oh,
overkill for
yeah.
a 4x2x2 done the way me and
Oh,
Alan
yeah.
do it, right? That's why we only use 1 or 2 bulbs. Now the idea is to create one good basking spot, pretty high, 130, maybe something like that in surface temperature. But the rest of the enclosure is 80s, maybe 90s right near the bulbs, but it's still going to be mid 80s somewhat throughout the whole rest of the cage. That's the way they kind of like it.
that's
You
the
know,
efficient way.
yeah, that's the best way to do it without them, let's say, disappearing or have low activity levels because it is so hot. Now, I had a question: is yours a really early riser, but you don't really see him in the
He
later in the
does,
day?
yeah. So like sometimes he'll come up, he'll wake up like at 8, the lights turn on like maybe like 8, he'll come up 8:30, he'll run around like a maniac for a while. And like he kind of goes, hides a little
Yeah.
bit, and then he'll maybe come back out when he wants. Like he just kind of he just has like differences in however it's like a day by day thing. Like, typically he's very running around like a maniac in the morning.
Yeah, and then he's done later in the day, right? Because it's just so hot. I mean, that's typical behavior, anyways. See if you would able to bring. Does your cool side say 88 degrees
It's
right
like
now?
that,
Right,
but I have definitely been modifying the lights up there. I've been trying to add some more LEDs, things that don't produce light. I've been experimenting.
or more so of see how it'd be if you brought the cooler side to a darker 82
Mm,
degrees, or 85, 83
that sounds good.
ish. Nothing like 86, 88, but try to see how he responds to it, activity level wise, and then also how your humidity circulates through your enclosure. It just it's because you have a lot going on. Some of the things may be hindered because of so much heat being
Mm.
cranked in. Not to say that your animal is unhealthy or something like
No,
that. It's
yeah, no,
just
I love Blueberry's constantly evolving,
um,
and I
just
definitely have like the
right.
setup I initially had him in, but the way the cage looks now versus when I first got him, it's completely different. So I've changed up a lot as I've learned more, and I mean, it's constantly a learning process. So I've definitely have learned a lot, and I think definitely keeping a monitor lizard like Charizard has definitely helped me just kind of find those resources, reach out to people, and just like kind of have that continued education type of mindset that I'll need throughout the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I bring it up also because I have some enclosures at home. The ones I run at the warehouse are set up a certain way. They're set up for the most part. I'm moving towards efficiency, so I want to be able to trap in as much heat and make my enclosures where the even my day to day, I'm taking all that into account. So I don't have to worry about the same humidity loss in the enclosures at the warehouse and whatnot. So trying to make it this, for my needs, perfect little setup where I can run 1 or 2 bulbs. It traps in a certain amount of humidity, but it's something that I can adjust throughout the year as I need to also. So whether that means like lights inside the cages that are able to be lowered and raised up, depending on how close I want the basking spot, or different things, if I have to change the wattage of the bulb and then change the height of the basking spot. But at home, I have a cage that looks exactly like yours, just split in half. I'm running, I think I'm running 100-watt heat emitter, ceramic heat emitter, but it's on top, so the animal can't get to it. In the day, I'm running like a 50-watt mini halogen, the LED light, and then one of those LED UVB lights, UVA UVB lights. So I got the same thing going on, but it's open top, it's glass, so it doesn't trap in the same amount of heat. But I've found that, depending on your setup, you got to use the different things to achieve what you want to. And I'm always fascinated by it, because you'll see, there's so many ways to skin a cat is when it comes to keeping. Of course, talking with Kai, we're more efficiency minded, because we need that to work, and it's simpler for us. But there are some advantages to, I think, the way that you have your light set up. You can achieve different things. Like you said, you can achieve different basking spots. When you're keeping multiple animals in the same cage, I kind of like being able to provide not only enrichment, but visual barriers within the same cage and different basking spots, because those different animals can come out at different times. So if you have a real dominant animal, he likes to be at the top, highest basking spot. And he likes to just perch up there for most of the day. And then some of the other animals might not feel as confident, or might come out when he's not there, just because they don't want to deal with him, or they want to stay more secluded in just their habits. So they'll come out and almost turn into like semi-nocturnal animals if you're running 24/7 lights or something. But in those, I think there's different ways to use these different setups. And I love to see how different people are keeping different things and where you're at, as far as location in the world. Actually, what part of Florida are you in?
I'm in the north central part right now, like in like kind of, I'm right at the border of the Panhandle right now.
Okay, so you get decent change in seasons.
There's a couple of weeks where it gets into like the 40s or 50s a night, but then it like warms back up to the 70s. So it's definitely not like South Florida by any means, where it's just hot all the time. Like their cool seasons like 60. So like there is a little bit more variation in temperature up here.
What would you say, like your ambient humidity throughout the year? What are your ranges?
I think it's like between like the 60s. I feel like for.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, no, it's definitely Florida it's still very humid. Like where I'm in, like we joke around, it's called the swamp, and it's like during the summer, it's like, oh my God, it is brutal out there.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting, because like over here, especially with Kai's at, if he tried to run a fully open top enclosure for certain animals, that wouldn't work too well with the humidity loss going on. I think right now my humidity, actually today it's okay, but here in the winter when it's just dry, there's no rain, 10% humidity, so we got to account. Yeah. You got to take this cage. You have 10% ambient humidity. Your cage has to be able to hold in the heat and the humidity to function right for the animal, because otherwise, it's just, sucking that humidity right out of that animal too. So it's always interesting to me. I wish maybe we'll do some live stream shows, Kai, in the future to share if people are brave enough, and you guys don't mind seeing my laundry in the back sometimes, Open book here. So Kai, was there something? I've been talking.
No, man. We're able to cover a fair amount with, his experiences so far, and how we're going to help, newcomers, especially when they need to go to the vet. It's a tough thing. It's really a decision. Comes down to financial and heartache and dealing with the really tough situations that you have no clue what's going on. So yeah, man, I really hope people have been able to gather a fair bit amount. I know you're not really like a vet just yet, right? But you've been able to experience a fair amount that just about anybody can gather from. So we really appreciate
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. And I mean, I've been listening to this podcast for a long time. I mean, I got my grasshoppers from Ukai, and we've been in touch for a lot. And I just love this podcast. And I've seen your stuff, Alan, and it's great. And I'm just really happy I've kind of entered this world of monitor keeping, and it's just really great just to hear other people's perspectives and just see how they keep animals and hear about it. It's great.
Awesome. I'm so glad you enjoy it, man. Yeah. So, Eric, real quick before we start wrapping this thing up, you had mentioned maybe getting a black throat monitor, female. What animal is it for you? As far as what is that dream animal? Is it a monitor?
Yeah, I'm a monitor guy. I've had a lot of work. I've worked with a lot of different reptiles, snakes, turtles. I've worked with lizards. I've kept lizards and turtles, but monitor lizards have taken the cake. I am 100% a monitor lizard guy. I definitely 100% will be keeping Ackies for the rest of my days. Whether I end up going into something a little bit larger, that just kind of depends on if I have space and the time and the money for it. So that's just going to be something I'll have to just research and look into in the future. But Ackies, that's happening.
Yeah, nice, that's man. Awesome. They are great animals. So, all right, Eric, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Charizard_the_Ackie. So I have an Instagram account for my lizard. You can, message me there. I will not be able to provide treatment or diagnose animals. I can help, guide you. I could guide you like, hey, you should go to a vet, but I cannot diagnose your animal if you send me something. But, you can connect, you can talk, we can share ideas, exchange things. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
Now, what if I just send you my animal?
If you send me the animal,
I'm just kidding.
I can take care of it. I will have fun.
Fix this here. Just kidding. No, I know that's very important to share with the people, the listeners out there. I know all of us try to cut corners and try to get that free diagnosis. And if you could just write me or send me a pad of the prescription, that'd be not for me, people, not for me, for the animals. Kai, how about yourself? I didn't think we did it in the last 2 episodes. Maybe we did. Where can people find you?
It's all right. Man, you're able to find me a little bit everywhere. You can find me on YouTube at Mangrove Mecca. Let's see, Instagram at big_lizard103. And then I'm most responsive, although I've been pretty responsive on Instagram lately. I'm most responsive on Facebook. So you can find me at just Kai Fan. You should be able to navigate my name through looking up the podcast and such like that. And yeah, be glad Kai, to hear from some of you guys.
What night does your show come on that people should avoid contact?
I don't even it comes on randomly now. It's like Hulu just releases it whenever they feel like it.
Oh, no.
Sometimes I just wait weeks. Yeah. Sometimes it's like repetitively every week or whatever. But yeah, man, when I'm in my shows or when I have time to actually catch up to my shows, I need to be left alone.
That's good stuff. Joking aside, you can find me at Origins_Reptile on Instagram and Origins Reptile on Facebook. Of course, you can find us here on the Monitor Keeping Podcast. Thank you guys for listening. We hope to bring you some good information. Reach out to us with questions, critiques, whatever you got. And I really do mean that. We do enjoy them. We enjoy reading through some stuff. And I feel like anything that anyone has to say we can use to make it better or add in some information that maybe we're missing. So, Eric, I hope to keep in touch with you. I'll keep watching your progress. Look forward to seeing, you go through the experience of having eggs hatch and seeing little faces. It's awesome. It's, really, really cool experience. So, all right. Anything else, guys?
Thanks for having me.
Man, thanks everybody for tuning
Thank you
in.
for having me here. And yeah, we'll definitely be in touch.